Breaking news this morning, dramatic developments happening in Israel.
They attacked by air, land and sea, taking Israel by surprise during a major Jewish holiday.
The Israel-Hamas war stoking protests across the U.S. at various college campuses.
The militant group Hamas firing thousands of rockets into the country, smoke and flames seen rising from multiple sites that were hit.
Now, 13 and a half hours after Hamas launched its audacious assault, Israel says it's at war.
My name is Dror. I was born in Israel in 1967, right after the Six-Day War. Obviously, I have a ton of family back in Israel, so I'm obviously going to be a pro-Israeli supporter in the discussion, but my goal is to just give my side of the story.
What was your first reaction to Hamas's recent attacks on Israel?
I'm not surprised. I've been saying it for months. As Israel was going through internal turmoil between themselves, I figured that's going to be an opening for somebody. Anytime you have fighting within yourself, the outside groups are always going to take advantage of that. And, Hamas being a terrorist group, not representative of the Islamic people, they're just, or at least Palestinian people, they're always looking for opportunities. And the attack on Israel is shocking, but it's not surprising.
Has someone you know been directly affected by the conflict?
I do know a few people, actually, weird enough, in the United States that I've worked with, and it's their families and friends that have been murdered during that peaceful rally. So that was really sad to see here. And then obviously my family, I have a lot of younger nephews and cousins and stuff that are in the military right now. So that's always scary.
What do you believe the Israeli government should do?
Well, I think it's Israeli or any government in the world. Anytime you get attacked, it's regardless if it's government or your own home. If you get attacked, you're bound to respond and retaliate or at least protect your family. You're not going to sit there and just say, I'm not going to do anything and continue to let people continue to ravage and kill people.
Do you believe that the Western media portrays the conflict accurately?
I think it's always slighted its sides. I mean, horrific acts are going to be slighted toward the side of the people that got affected by that. So just like we just saw, with the festival, it's a peaceful festival, people getting murdered, slaughtered, killed and stuff. It's going to bring a lot more disturbing images than we're used to in today's world. Barbaric times are gone from the 13, 14, 1500 where fighting were brutalized and it didn't matter if you hung, killed, beheaded somebody. That was just a part of nature. It's not a part of today's world. And to see these kind of things is always going to make it worse. So anytime you read that, you look at news media outlets, it's always going to be slighted toward the people that were victimized. So it's going to seem like different. But again, if you're living there and you actually lost somebody and you see somebody getting slaughtered, it doesn't matter who portrays it. That's just it's a brutalized act.
Do you think that any of the violence is justified?
No, I don't. Again, if you can't talk things out as a normal human being and all you do is fight over things, it's always going to be like that. And it's going to be very, very unjust. There's no just for violence in terms of those things.
As kind of a follow-up to that one, was Israel's response to Hamas justified?
Yeah, you have to. Again, as I said, somebody who doesn't live or has never been to Israel is not going to understand it, because when people say Israel's the size of New Jersey, okay, so you think of the size of New Jersey. Now take Israel and divide it by half, because it's the northern half where 90% of the people live. That means you're now the size of Rhode Island. It's a pretty small area. So when somebody attacks you, if you just compare it to your own home, if you moved into a neighborhood and everybody disliked you and everybody attacked your house, you'd move out of there. But in Israel, there's no place for them to go. They're either leave the whole land and move to another country, or they're living with 9, 10 nations that don't like them and don't want them there. So it's kind of hard for somebody to understand that, but it's such a small area for somebody to attack you over your fence. What do? If your neighbor shoots at you, are you going to sit there and just look at him, or are you going to take your own gun and shoot him? Doesn't make it better, but that's what they have to do.
What's your ideal resolution to the conflict, like the one-state solution, two-state solution, or basically the abolishment of one of the territories?
Well, yeah, I think in some way you have to get rid of Gaza. It's kind of an odd situation that Gaza Strip, it's not in Egypt, it's above Egypt, it's in Israel, it's on the very tip of Israel, but it's inside Israel, where you've given them the Golan Heights, which is the part of the land that were taken over in 1967 after the war. You've given all that up. That should be their land. And now that's kind of their own entity, because you got that between that and Jordan and all these places, as opposed to having it in the middle of your country. You can't take a city, I mean, wherever you're from, if you just pick a city in New York City and say, okay, well, we're going to give you Manhattan, and that's going to be a country of its own. It's kind of hard to do that with inside New York. It's still New York. So it makes it very hard. So I think you have to keep it as a one country. I think you eliminate the Gaza Strip, move everybody to the Golan Heights, which is big enough and land that's abundance of land that they can actually live as people. You're packing 2 million people in a small area that's probably no bigger than about 30, 40 miles type of land. To put 2 million people is a ton of people.
Do you believe that Hamas has different intentions and goals than the Palestine civilians?
Absolutely. I think it's a terrorist group that was designed and brought up by Iran. And I think, and I will say a couple of things after, but as you know it, they're a terrorist group. They don't care. Their sole survivor is to inflict pain and anguish on everybody else. When the Palestinians voted them into office in 2006, they didn't realize they would take over everything, and they basically took over all their land and basically said, we'll make the rules, we control everything. So you're kind of left in your own world there. It kind of stinks for them. And I think there's a lot of peaceful Palestinians, but I think there's a lot of young, ambitious guys who get riled up and doing this, and that makes it very hard. I heard a statement the other day of a lady that they asked her, should you love your child more than you hate the Jews? And she said no. That makes no sense as a humanity, to say that you dislike your own child, to be a bomber or suicidal, go kill Jews because you hate the Jews more. That just doesn't make sense as a humanity part. So I think there's a radical side to it, but there's a lot of peaceful people that are just trapped in the situation. And like I said, you're putting 2 million people in a very tiny area that's not going to be very conducive. So you're making it into an almost impossible living condition. And then you have a radical group that's leading them. They can't do anything about it.
What do you believe that the U.S. government should do to help resolve this conflict, if anything?
I've always said this, and again, it's hard because I was born there and I lived in Israel for 12 years, so it's kind of tough. But I mean, the U.S. has the responsibility to help Israel, but not the responsibility to be on the ground. We do not need to be in another war. We do not need to get inside there. I think they should help supply what they've done, but let Israel control their own situation, their own entity. So if Israel gets radical and does what we did in 2003 and run into Afghanistan blindsided, then Israel is going to cause itself more problems. So they have to be much more cautious than they were back in 2000, 1990, 1980, and 1970s. It's a different world now. These people are much more sophisticated. They're much more intelligent. They have a lot more resources. So you have to be a little smarter. But I just don't think the U.S. needs to be involved in terms of ground troops and stuff like that. There's no reason. Having the ship there, that's great because that kind of maybe balance a little bit. People might fear from doing too much damage because the U.S. will stand there with a ship. They can do a lot more damage to a lot of these places. But having ground troops creates a lot more problems for us, both financially and stuff. But they have a responsibility. The U.S. has created many responsibilities, but they can't control the world. It's not 1950s anymore. We're a superpower, but we're not the superpower that we were in 1950, where it's us and Japan and whatever else was there, USSR, and that's it. You got many entities, everybody's got power to do something, so you can't create that world like that where somebody just presses a button and then you have World War III. World War III is not World War II anymore. It's everybody's dropping an atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb on everybody, and that's the end of the world.
What are your thoughts on how the rest of the Arab world treats the Palestinians?
Well, I think this kind of leads to what my whole situation is. Again, I was born right after the 6-Day War. My dad and my mom both were in the military. My dad fought in the 6-Day War and all that situation. So the Palestinian people were always, gypsies, and they were all left alone and stuff like that. But when 1967, after the war, where everybody decided they were going to destroy Israel in 2 days, and then Israel won in 6 days and defeated 6 armies, next thing you know, everybody dismantled and just said, get the heck out of their country. So they let all these Palestinians, who were basically gypsies at the time, living in tents, to leave the countries, and told them, get out of our country, get out of our country. And they did. And the only one who accepted them was Israel. And from 1967 till 1982, and I left in 79. So again, at those times, we've had peace with the Palestinians all throughout time. We never had problems with them, never had any issues. They lived among us and worked among us, and there was nothing until 1982 when Hezbollah came in, and then Hamas.
How old were you when you left?
I left when I was 12, so I didn't serve in the military, obviously.
What age did they start that?
18.
Okay.
So as soon as you're done high school, you go in the military for 3 years for men, 2 years for women, and after that you go to college and do everything else.
Do you believe that Iran is behind the attacks and supporting the terrorists?
I think it's pretty clear that they are. I mean, everybody knows that. I don't think that's a propaganda or anything like that. I think that's always been the sole relationship with Iran. I mean, again, you can go back again to 1979 with the U.S. hostages. And then right after that, again, like I said, they created the Hezbollah and Hamas, which were two terroristic groups, and moved them into Lebanon, and then fought with the Syrians, and then fought with Lebanon, and then created a situation. So they're always looked for ways to get into Israel and how to destroy Israel. Israel's been the only one to be able to stand up to them and go after their nuclear power and stuff, and everybody else has been kind of afraid to touch that.
Do you believe the violence will spread in the region?
Yes, especially after watching this. Like I said, I think it's hard to watch. The hospital bombing, has already been, again, decided it's not Israel that did it and stuff like that. But that sparks a lot of anger, animosity, no matter if they believe it or not. A lot of people all around that the Arab nations are all protesting right now. They're all going against. Look, the president was just in Israel, and he was going to go have a meeting with people in Oman and all these places in Jordan, all that, and they all canceled on him. That tells you that something's not right there. So I feel like there's going to be a lot more problems, and I think people don't realize how easy it is to get these people riled up. No different than seeing kids on the gangs and stuff like that who are loners and stuff like that to get roped into being in gangs and stuff because they're getting pressed into it and tell them, you hate this. Even if they saw the video of the rocket coming in and blowing the hospital, they still would go against it and say Israel blew it up, because that's the notion. Once you have a hatred towards something, it's always going to be there.
What do you think you would say to the Palestinian civilians if you could speak to all of them?
Well, again, I mean, what is it that they want? Do they want the Hamas to lead them? Do they want peace? Do they want to live? Do they want to prosper? Which part is it? Because continuous fighting is never going to be the answer. It's never going to win out. It's never going to hold. Israel has to play defense. And sometimes they have to play offense, obviously, to destroy certain situations. But Palestinian people, they're dropped in a low area. What do you want to gain out of it? Do you want to grow and do you prosper? Do you want to develop and lead a nation? Or do you want to be continuously led by Arab groups that are against Israel, that want to just destroy the place where you're living within? So it's somebody really, you're saying, I want to have peace, but go ahead and bomb my own house. No matter what happens, I don't care about my own house. It makes no sense. So I wish, they can look back. I wish they can see who took them in 19. And this shows, again, like I said, the Egyptians with the Rafah opening, I get it, there's bombs flying and stuff, but they could have opened it a long time ago and let those people out. They brought 300, 600,000 people down to the Rafah entrance over there, and they can't cross over to Egypt because Egypt won't open it. That tells you something. They don't want them there. They would open it in a heartbeat if they wanted them there. It's not that hard to open a gate and say, okay, come on in, because they don't want to deal with all this stuff. They don't want to deal with a riffraff. They don't trust that there's no Hamas people among them. They don't trust that there's murderers and killers among them. So it's sad to think like that, but that's what it is. So you have maybe 500,000 people that are trapped within 520,000 people, and then you only have 20,000 people bad. But those 500,000 people are trapped within those people. So right now, the Arab nations are all PLO, and we support you, and we love the Palestinian people, but they're not doing anything to help them. They're not bringing them in. They're not opening and saying, come on over, live with us. I understand you don't want to leave your own little state. I get that. But right now, it's a war zone. It's not going to get better there because you have a terrorist group leading it. So Israel's not going to give up on it.